The tears streamed down Zara Vance's face like the summer rains that seldom blessed the parched lands of Nebraska Territory in 1868. She stood defiantly in the town square of Cottonwood Springs, clutching a crumpled foreclosure notice while the banker and his cronies mocked her grief with cruel laughter. None of them noticed the tall figure watching from the shadowed porch of the general store, his eyes narrowing beneath the brim of a dust-worn hat. "Look at her, boys. Crying won't bring back your daddy's ranch, girl," sneered Maxwell Thornton, the bank owner whose belly strained against his fine waistcoat. "Should have thought about that before old man Vance borrowed more than he could repay." Zara wiped her tears with the back of her hand, leaving a smudge of dirt across her sun-freckled cheek. At 22, she had already weathered more hardship than most twice her age. The drought had taken their crops, pneumonia had taken her father 3 months prior, and now the bank was taking the only home she'd ever known. "I just need more time," she pleaded, her voice steadier than her trembling hands. "The cattle drive from Texas arrives next week." "I have buyers and I have paperwork." Thornton waved the notice in her face. "You have 3 days, Miss Vance. Then my men will escort you off the property." The watching stranger stepped into the sunlight, his spurs jingling softly against the wooden boardwalk. Ezra Ryder walked with the easy confidence of a man who knew his own strength, but rarely needed to prove it. His trail-worn clothes spoke of long journeys, but the twin Colts holstered at his hips commanded respect in a land where law was still finding its footing. "Seems to me," Ryder said, his voice carrying across the suddenly quiet square, "that a real man would show more patience to a lady who's just lost her father." Thornton swiveled, his face flushing with annoyance at the interruption. "This isn't your business, stranger. Maybe not." Ezra stepped closer, dust swirling around his boots. "But I've been riding a long trail, and nothing sours my disposition quite like seeing men take pleasure in a woman's tears." His eyes, the color of a stormy sky, met Zara's. "Each tear waters my resolve, madam." Zara straightened her spine, unprepared for this unexpected alliance. The cowboy was tall and lean, weathered by sun and wind. His face might have been handsome once, before a scar traced its way from his left temple to the corner of his jaw, giving him a permanent half-grimace that somehow suited him. "I don't need charity," she said quietly. "Good," Ezra replied with the ghost of a smile, "because I don't offer it. What I do offer is fair work for fair pay." He turned back to Thornton. "And I'm willing to bet this lady works harder than you ever have." The banker puffed up like a bullfrog. "You can't just ride into town, and I already did." Ezra cut him off, his tone deceptively mild. "Now I'm heading to the saloon for a drink. When I return, I expect you'll have reconsidered the terms of Miss Vance's loan. A 30-day extension seems reasonable." "Or what?" Thornton challenged. Ezra didn't answer immediately. Instead, he drew a silver dollar from his pocket and flipped it high into the air. In one fluid motion, he drew his right Colt, fired, and sent the coin spinning into the dirt at Thornton's feet. A perfect hole pierced its center. "Or I might take an interest in your business practices," he said softly. "I hear the territorial governor is an old friend of mine, might be worth a letter." The crowd that had gathered to witness Zara's humiliation now murmured appreciatively at this display. Thornton's face paled beneath his beard as he recognized the implicit threat. Banking regulations were still loosely enforced in the territories, but an official investigation could uncover all manner of indiscretions. 30 days, the banker muttered, retreating. Not a day more. As the crowd dispersed, Zara approached Ezra, uncertainty warring with gratitude in her expression. "Why would you do that for a stranger?" Ezra retrieved his coin, examining the hole before pocketing it again. "Maybe I'm tired of men like Thornton thinking they own the world." His eyes traveled over her face, noting the strength beneath her vulnerability. "Or maybe I just can't abide seeing honest tears mocked." "Those 30 days won't change anything," Zara admitted, her voice low. "The ranch is failing, has been since the drought started. Then we have 30 days to turn it around, Ezra replied simply. If you'll have my help. Zara studied him, this mysterious cowboy who had appeared like a character from one of the dime novels sold at the general store. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, he answered honestly. Not yet. But I'm handy with cattle, good with my hands, and I've seen more of this country than most. Knowledge counts for something out here. And what do you want in return? Room and board while I'm here, and the satisfaction of seeing Thornton's face when you pay that loan in full. Zara extended her hand. Deal, Mr. Ryder. His calloused palm met hers. Call me Ezra. The ride to the Vance ranch took them through rolling prairie, golden in the late afternoon sun. Zara rode with the easy confidence of someone who had grown up in the saddle, while Ezra's sturdy chestnut gelding followed behind, laden with his modest possessions. It's not much, Zara warned as they crested a hill and the ranch came into view. The small cabin nestled against a stand of cottonwoods, a barn and corral nearby. A meager herd of cattle, no more than 30 head, grazed in the distance. It's home, Ezra observed, noting the tidy yard and the smoke curling from the chimney. That's worth fighting for. Inside the cabin, they were greeted by Martha Holloway, a gray-haired widow who had been looking after the place since Abraham Vance's death. Her suspicious gaze softened slightly at Zara's explanation of Ezra's intervention in town. Well, any enemy of Maxwell Thornton is a friend of mine, Martha declared. Though we're stretched thin enough as it is, Miss Zara. I don't eat much, Ezra assured her, removing his hat respectfully. Good, because there's not much to eat, Martha retorted, but gestured him toward a chair at the simple wooden table. Stew's almost ready. You can wash up at the pump outside. Over the simple meal, Zara explained their situation. The drought had devastated their crops 2 years running, forcing her father to take out loans against the property. The small cattle herd was meant to be their salvation, but Abraham had died before the plan could bear fruit. The big ranchers won't even talk to me, Zara said bitterly. They see a woman trying to run a ranch and just laugh. Pride's a luxury most can't afford out here, Ezra commented. But cattle I know something about. 30 head won't save this ranch, Martha interjected. No, Ezra agreed, but the right 30 might make a difference. Quality over quantity. And there are other ways to turn a profit if you're willing to consider them. Later, after Martha had retired to her small room off the kitchen, Ezra and Zara sat on the porch, watching lightning flicker on the distant horizon. The promise of rain hung in the air, tantalizing but uncertain. Why are you really helping me? Zara asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Ezra considered the question, watching the play of emotions across her face. In the lantern light, her features were striking, not conventionally beautiful perhaps, but arresting, with high cheekbones and determined eyes that reflected copper in the glow. 6 years ago, I watched men like Thornton take everything from my family back in Kansas, he said finally. I was too young, too green to stop it, been carrying that weight ever since, so I'm your redemption. There was no bitterness in her tone, only curiosity. No, madam, you're your own redemption. I'm just lending a hand where I can. And after the 30 days. Ezra leaned back in his chair, gazing at the stars now appearing above them. I haven't planned that far ahead in a long time. The next morning began before dawn. Ezra was already at the corral when Zara emerged from the cabin, blinking sleep from her eyes. He had assessed the stock and separated several animals from the others. These 5, he explained as she approached, are your best breeding stock, pure longhorn with good conformation. The rest are mixed blood but serviceable. How can you tell? Zara asked, leaning on the fence beside him. My father raised cattle in Kansas before the war. I grew up learning to read bloodlines like some folks read books. Over the following days, Ezra proved his worth many times over. He mended fences, repaired the barn roof, and worked tirelessly with the cattle. Each evening, he would sit with Zara, drawing up plans to maximize the ranch's potential. The land to the north, by the creek, he suggested on their 5th night. Perfect for hay if we can irrigate it properly. Zara's initial wariness had given way to cautious respect. Ezra worked harder than any hired hand she'd ever known, never complaining, always finding solutions where she saw only problems. On the 10th day, disaster struck. Zara woke to the sound of gunfire. She grabbed her father's rifle and rushed outside to find Ezra exchanging shots with 3 masked riders who were attempting to drive off their cattle. "Get down," Ezra shouted, pulling her behind the water trough as bullets splintered the wood above them. Zara steadied her rifle against the trough and fired, striking one rustler in the shoulder. The man yelled in pain, nearly falling from his horse before his companions grabbed him and retreated into the pre-dawn darkness. "Are you hurt?" Ezra asked urgently, his hands checking her for injuries. "I'm fine," she assured him, suddenly aware of his proximity, the scent of gunpowder and leather enveloping her. "Do you think they'll be back?" "Not tonight." His eyes were fierce in the fading moonlight. "But they'll try again. Those weren't random rustlers. Thornton." Ezra nodded grimly. "He's not willing to wait 30 days. That afternoon, they rode into town together, straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Davis was a well-meaning man, but everyone knew he owed his position to Thornton's influence. "I'll look into it," he promised without meeting their eyes. "But rustlers are common these days, hard to prove who's behind it. 3 men tried to steal my entire herd," Zara insisted. "That's not random, that's targeted." "Do your job, Davis," Ezra added quietly, "before someone else has to." The implied threat hung in the air as they left the office. Outside, they encountered several cowboys lounging near the saloon who jeered as Zara passed. "There goes crying Zara," one called out. "Better have your handkerchief ready, boys. She'll flood the street with tears before sundown." Before Zara could respond, Ezra stepped between them. "A man who mocks a woman's tears," he said clearly enough for everyone to hear, "reveals more about his own weakness than hers." "What's it to you, Scarface?" the cowboy challenged, pushing away from the hitching post. "Every tear she sheds," Ezra replied evenly, "waters my resolve to stand beside her. Consider that before you speak again." Something in his tone made the man back down, muttering curses as he retreated into the saloon with his friends. "You don't have to defend me," Zara said as they walked toward the general store. "I know," Ezra replied simply. "You're more than capable, but sometimes it's not about need, it's about standing together." At the general store, they purchased supplies and heard rumors of a cattle buyer from Chicago who was staying at the hotel, looking for quality stock to ship east. "That could be our answer," Ezra mused as they loaded their purchases. "If we can get top dollar for even half the herd combined with the hay we could sell." Zara nodded, hope kindling in her chest for the first time in months. It might be enough. They found the buyer, a portly man named Harrison Wells, taking his dinner in the hotel restaurant. Initially dismissive of Zara, his interest peaked when Ezra described the bloodlines of their best cattle. "Pure Longhorn stock is getting harder to find," Wells admitted. "The Herefords are coming in, changing the herds. Our cattle are range hardy," Ezra emphasized. "They'll survive the trip east better than most." "I'll ride out tomorrow," Wells decided. "No promises, but I'll take a look." As they rode home in the gathering dusk, Zara felt a strange lightness in her heart despite the dangers they faced. "You've brought hope back to the ranch," she said quietly. Ezra glanced at her, his expression softening. "Hope was already there, sometimes it just needs someone to point it out." That night, as they sat on the porch watching another distant storm that refused to break over their land, Zara found herself studying Ezra's profile, wondering about the man beneath the quiet competence. "How did you get the scar?" she asked suddenly. Ezra's hand unconsciously traced the mark. "Quantrill's Raiders, 1863. They came through our town in Kansas, burning and killing. I tried to stop them from taking our horses, got this for my trouble. You were just a boy." 17, he corrected. "Old enough to fight, young enough to be foolish about it. And your family." His jaw tightened. "Father died at Antietam. Mother held on until 65, then a fever took her. After that, there wasn't much reason to stay in one place. Zara reached across the space between them, her fingers brushing his wrist. I'm sorry. Ezra looked down at her hand, then back to her face. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared loss and resilience. The past is written, he said finally. It's tomorrow that concerns me now. The next day, Wells arrived to inspect the cattle. His practiced eye assessed each animal carefully before he made an offer that exceeded their expectations. Half now, half upon delivery to the railhead in Grand Island, he proposed, counting out a substantial sum. I'll send men to help with the drive in 2 weeks. After Wells departed, Zara stared at the money in her hands. This is more than half of what we need for the loan. Ezra smiled, a rare, full smile that transformed his face. And with the hay we can sell, plus the remaining cattle. Zara impulsively threw her arms around him, the money clutched in her fist. We might actually save the ranch. Ezra's arms encircled her hesitantly, then with more confidence. For a moment they stood together, celebrating this small victory against overwhelming odds. When Zara pulled back, her face was flushed with more than just excitement. She began, but the sound of approaching horses interrupted her. 3 riders appeared on the ridge, the same masked men who had tried to rustle their cattle. Only now, they weren't interested in the livestock. They opened fire without warning, bullets kicking up dirt at Ezra and Zara's feet. Ezra pushed Zara toward the barn, drawing his pistol as they ran. Inside, they took cover behind bales of hay as the attackers surrounded the structure. Thornton must have heard about Wells, Ezra said grimly, checking his ammunition. If they kill us, the ranch reverts to the bank immediately, Zara realized, her father's rifle steady in her hands. No 30-day extension, a voice called from outside. Come on out, Ryder. This ain't your fight, seems they know you, Zara observed, raising an eyebrow. I've made an impression, Ezra replied dryly. Stay low, I'm going to work my way around to the loft. Before she could protest, he was moving, using the barn's interior shadows for cover. Zara fired carefully through a gap in the wooden slats, keeping the attackers at bay while Ezra positioned himself above. From the loft, Ezra had a clear view of all 3 men. He took careful aim and fired twice in rapid succession. One man fell with a shout of pain, clutching his leg. Another's gun flew from his hand, splintered by Ezra's bullet. The third attacker, recognizing their disadvantage, dragged his wounded companion to their horses. This ain't over, he shouted as they retreated. When the dust settled, Ezra climbed down from the loft to find Zara already planning their next move. We need to get to town, she insisted. Confront Thornton publicly before he tries again. Ezra nodded, impressed by her strategic thinking. We'll take the money to the bank. Make a partial payment on the loan. Force his hand in front of witnesses. They rode hard into Cottonwood Springs, drawing curious glances as they dismounted in front of the bank. Inside, they found Thornton counting money, his face darkening when he saw them. We're here to make a payment, Zara announced loudly, drawing the attention of every customer. Thornton's eyes narrowed. The full amount is due in 18 days. The agreement allows for partial payments, Ezra countered, unless you've changed the terms again. The banker glared but couldn't refuse with so many witnesses present. He grudgingly accepted the money, writing out a receipt with poorly concealed anger. This buys you time, nothing more, he hissed. It buys us justice, Zara replied calmly. And speaking of justice, your men failed today, Thornton. They'll hang if they try again. I don't know what you're talking about, the banker blustered, but his face betrayed him. 3 men, Ezra described carefully. One with a new bullet hole in his right leg. I'd check the doctor's office if I were Sheriff Davis. As if summoned by his name, the sheriff entered the bank, his expression troubled. Mr. Thornton, I need a word. It seems Jason Carter was brought in with a gunshot wound, claims it happened at the Vance ranch. The look of trapped calculation on Thornton's face told Ezra all he needed to know. They had him cornered, at least temporarily, outside the bank. Zara's shoulders sagged with relief. That won't stop him for long, no, Ezra agreed, but it gives us breathing room. And sometimes that's all you need to turn the tide. The following 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Ezra and Zara prepared the cattle for the drive to Grand Island, repaired fences, and harvested hay from the northern fields. They worked side by side from dawn until dusk, falling into an easy rhythm that belied how short their acquaintance had been during those days. Something shifted between them. Glances held longer than necessary. Hands lingered when passing tools. Conversations stretched into the night, revealing more of themselves to each other than either had intended. Ezra found himself telling her about his dreams before the war of land of his own, a place to put down roots. Zara confessed her fears about failing her father's legacy and her secret longing to see more of the world beyond Nebraska Territory. 3 days before Wells's men were due to arrive for the cattle drive, a miracle occurred. Real, soaking rain fell on the parched land. Zara ran outside when the first drops fell, tilting her face to the sky in wonder. Ezra joined her, laughing as the downpour intensified, plastering their clothes to their bodies. Zara's joy was infectious, and before he could think better of it, he caught her hands in his, spinning her in an impromptu dance in the mud. When they stopped, breathless and dripping, their faces were inches apart. Ezra's hands moved to cup her face, thumbs gently brushing away the raindrops or perhaps tears from her cheeks. "Each tear," he whispered, "each raindrop waters something growing between us." Zara's answer was to close the distance between them, her lips meeting his with a certainty that belied her inexperience. The kiss tasted of rain and promise, deepening as Ezra pulled her closer, his heart thundering louder than the storm around them. When they finally broke apart, Zara's eyes were bright with emotion. "I wasn't looking for this," she admitted. "Neither was I," Ezra replied honestly, "but sometimes the best things find us when we're looking elsewhere." They returned to the cabin, soaked but transformed. Martha took one look at their faces and busied herself in the kitchen, hiding a knowing smile. That evening, as they sat before the fire drying out, Ezra made his decision. "When this is over," he said quietly, "when the loan is paid and the ranch is secure, I'd like to stay if you'll have me." Zara's hand found his. "I was hoping you would say that." The next morning they awoke to disaster. Overnight, someone had cut the fence around their best pasture. Half the cattle were scattered across the surrounding countryside. "Thornton again," Ezra growled as they mounted up to begin the roundup. "He's desperate now." It took them the entire day, working with Martha and 2 neighboring farmers who answered their call for help, to recover most of the missing cattle. By sunset, they were 5 animals short, including 2 of their best breeding cows. "Wells arrives tomorrow," Zara said desperately as they unsaddled their exhausted horses. "If we don't have the full count, we'll find them," Ezra promised. "First light, and I have an idea where to look." That night, they spread out maps of the surrounding area. Ezra pointed to a hidden valley on Thornton's property. "If I were hiding stolen cattle, that's where I'd put them. Enough grass, water, and out of sight from the main trails." "We can't just ride onto his land," Zara objected. "That's asking for trouble." "Sometimes trouble needs an invitation," Ezra replied with a grim smile. "But we won't go alone." Before dawn, they met Sheriff Davis outside of town, accompanied by 3 deputies and the cattle buyer Wells, who had arrived early. "This is highly irregular," Davis protested. "I can't search a man's property without cause." "The cause is 5 head of cattle with the Vance brand," Wells interjected. "As the legal purchaser of those animals, I have every right to recover my property." The sheriff wavered, his loyalty to Thornton battling with his duty. Finally, he nodded. "We'll look, just to be thorough." They rode onto Thornton's land as the sun crested the horizon, following Ezra's lead toward the hidden valley. The banker himself intercepted them at the edge of his property, blustering with indignation. "This is outrageous, trespassing. "I'll have you removed from office, Davis." "Just a quick look, Mr. Thornton," the sheriff placated, "to clear things up." As predicted, they found the missing cattle in the secluded valley, Vance brands clearly visible despite attempts to alter them. Thornton's protests died as one of his ranch hands, caught in the act of changing another brand, confessed under questioning. "Mr. Thornton told us to take them," the young cowboy admitted, "said it was just business, getting what was owed to him." The sheriff had no choice but to arrest Thornton on the spot for cattle rustling a hanging offense in the territories. The banker's face was ashen as he was led away, his empire crumbling around him. Back at the ranch, Wells oversaw the selection of cattle for the drive to Grand Island. "I'll take 20 head now," he decided, "and I'm willing to contract for the rest of your calves next spring at premium prices." When he handed over the remaining payment, Zara could hardly believe the amount. Combined with what they'd already paid and the value of the hay they'd sold, they now had more than enough to clear the loan entirely. "Your father would be proud," Wells said kindly. Not many could have turned things around like this. Zara glanced at Ezra, standing tall beside her. "I had help." That evening, they rode into town together to settle matters at the bank. With Thornton in custody, his assistant manager was only too happy to process the loan payment in full and provide written confirmation that the ranch was free and clear. As they stepped out onto the boardwalk, the same cowboys who had mocked Zara's tears weeks before approached them, hats in hands. "Miss Vance," their leader said awkwardly, "we heard what happened with Thornton, wanted to say we're sorry for how we treated you before." Ezra tensed beside her, but Zara laid a calming hand on his arm. "Apology accepted," she said graciously. "Though perhaps in the future you'll remember that tears aren't always a sign of weakness." "Yes, madam," the cowboy agreed, chastened, "and congratulations on saving your place." As the men retreated, Ezra smiled down at her. "You showed more mercy than they deserved." "Life's too short to carry grudges," Zara replied, "especially now." They rode home beneath a vast canopy of stars, the future stretching before them like the endless prairie. At the ranch gate, Ezra reined his horse to a stop. "Before we go in," he said, suddenly serious, "I need to say something." Zara waited, her heart beating a rapid tattoo against her ribs. "I've wandered for 6 years, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home." Ezra's voice was low, intimate in the darkness. "But these past weeks, working beside you, facing down troubles together, I found something I thought was lost forever." "And what's that?" Zara asked softly. "A place to belong, someone to belong to." His hand found hers in the darkness. "I love you, Zara Vance. Your strength, your tears, your laughter, all of it. I want to build something lasting here with you." Zara's eyes glistened in the moonlight. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Ezra Ryder?" "I am." He smiled, the scar on his face softening in the gentle light. "Will you marry me?" Make this wandering cowboy the happiest man in Nebraska Territory? A single tear traced its way down Zara's cheek as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Ezra leaned across the space between their horses, catching the tear with his thumb. "Remember what I told you that first day. Each tear waters my love for you, grows it stronger, deeper." Their lips met in a promise as enduring as the land around them. Behind them, their ranch waited in the moonlight, a testament to what could be accomplished when hope and determination joined forces against impossible odds. In the years that followed, the Ryder Ranch became one of the most prosperous in the territory. Ezra and Zara welcomed 3 children, 2 daughters with their mother's spirit, and a son with his father's steady hands. The drought years faded into memory as good seasons followed bad, each challenge met together. Sometimes, visitors would remark on the unusual carving that hung above their fireplace. A single teardrop, carved in wood and polished to a high shine. Few understood its significance, but for Ezra and Zara, it remained a constant reminder of how their story began with tears that watered the seeds of a love strong enough to transform both their lives.